Hello and welcome again to the Skillwork Forum. As always, I'm Tim. I'm here with my partner, Brett from Skillwork. And this podcast really is we get together, we talk about industry trends, issues, concerns, things hopefully to help us all get better in our businesses as we're trying to address this challenge we have with staffing and making sure that we have the right folks we need to advance our companies forward. So we're going to start a couple of podcasts here in a row that are focused on staffing and HR related topics. So really all around that. And three main things we're going to try to hit on in the next few podcasts. You can join us for this one and the two that follow after it. We're going to be talking about how to attract top talent. And that's actually the topic of today's podcast I'll get to in just a minute. Then we're going to talk about, well, now that you've got them, how do you keep them? How do you retain them? So that'll be the second one. And then really part of that, but focus of the third podcast is going to be how to create a culture that engages and keeps that high caliber talent around. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about attracting top talent. And we're very fortunate to have a special guest with us today, Mr. Tom Kosnik. Tom, I've gotten to know here in the last year. He's just a great guy. He's the president of the Vices Group. They are recognized as industry leaders primarily in the staffing world for companies that are in this business. He's a well-known speaker. He's published in a lot of different things. And so welcome to Skillwork Forum. Tom, did I miss anything in your intro?
No, just married 31 years and I've run 30 marathons in addition to everything else that you talked about.
Okay, so you're one marathon behind. You better get on it. And I know we talked off camera and you did a little run this morning. So yeah, Brett and I have done a few of those kind of things as well. So not 30, but yeah, thanks. And I have got a chance to meet some of your family, wonderful family. And it speaks highly of you, Tom. So, hey, we're going to jump right into this topic, this idea of attracting top talent. And like you, we're constantly trying to learn and taking information, Tom. And there was a white paper we looked at recently from an organization that we're involved with that's primarily manufacturing focused, but they surveyed 700 of their members. And in that survey, 73% of those companies don't have any kind of formalized strategy for how they're going to attract, retain talent. 73%. Does that surprise you? I mean, is that common that this most important thing people don't pay much attention to?
Yeah, actually, it does not surprise me. And, a couple of things. I mean, when you look at businesses overall, I mean, 3/4 of the businesses in the United States are less than 1 million. And then another 20-something% of them are 1 million to 5 million or 1 million to 10 million. And so these are really owner operator type businesses. And so the owner is busy getting new business, trying to run the business itself. Even the government considers 500 employees or less a small business. Even in a manufacturing facility that's 300 people, 400 people. Tim, what happens? Somebody who is an administrative assistant, let's give this person some HR duties. Let's send her to an HR workshop. And the business grows. You get 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, and all of a sudden, now you need a real recruiting division or real recruiting going on in an HR department. But the poor HR department has never been fully trained in how to source talent. They just do what they learn to do to find jobs themselves. It's not a surprise that a lot of these organizations. And hey, look, I consult to the staffing industry. A lot of my clients don't have a formalized hiring process for salespeople and recruiters.
Yeah, that's interesting because, we're in that business as well. And we have this every day. That's what we're doing. We're sourcing people, but we have this internal team that drives the engine that sometimes doesn't get the same amount of focus. So point well taken. And we're kind of in that small business mentality, we really are. So,
yeah. Hey, Tom. So welcome. We haven't ever had a chance to meet in person yet, but that'll come in due time. So I'm going to jump in. And so, obviously every company talks about their talent is their top asset and their top priorities. So, why does staffing need to continue to be a top priority for all levels of the organization?
Great question. And I'm going to refer to the experts that wrote Good to Great, get the right people on the bus. I mean, sure, like vision, have a compelling vision, know how to communicate that vision, have compelling values, know how to live those values. But number one, get the right people on the bus and then get the right people on the bus in the right seats on the bus. And that companies that do that, you can see that they outperform their competitors. And we hear that all the time. I mean, how many times have you guys gone to a business meeting? Oh, get the right people on the bus. Much more difficult to do than a lot of details in getting the right people on the bus and a lot of details of getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. And then in addition to that, gosh, you've got the whole change in how we manage people. There's been a seismic shift in how to manage people, which you guys will talk about when you're talking about engagement on your next podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of leads into our next question, but you nailed it. And, we were going to talk about, hey, what's more important, right? Talent or, getting, the technology and process in place. And I think you nailed it. You got to get the right people because they can figure out stuff like that. And I think we spend a significant amount of time trying to find the right people. And I would say early on at Skillwork here, talking about our internal team, Tom, we really focused on culture and character, things that lined up with our core values at the expense of competency, for lack of a better word, like can they actually do the job? And, so we kind of erred on that side. Great people. I use that term error. I mean, they're great people, but we kind of got to move the bus forward. Somebody's got to drive and so forth. So how do you balance that?
Well, hey, look, I mean, because in the end, this is real simple. If you do not have a hiring process, you don't have job descriptions or job profiles, you don't know the competencies, you don't understand the organizational culture, you know what happens? You hire people that are like you, or you hire people you like. You don't end up hiring people that can actually do the job or fit the role. So you have to have structure in place to ensure that you're sourcing the right candidates and bringing the right candidates on, and then onboarding. Again, that's the whole engagement piece, knowing how to onboard persons as well. So frankly, most companies and most hiring managers, they end up hiring people that they like, or they hire people that are like them because they don't have the systems, they don't have the processes, they don't have the job profiles, they don't know the competencies, they don't know how to test for the culture to make sure there's a culture match. And, we can talk about all those different things. But that's why it's so difficult. There's a science to finding the right people on the bus. And it's not rocket science, but it does take somebody to dedicate and put those processes and procedures and then find the right tools for the organization to utilize in order to ensure greater success with their hires.
Yeah, so it's a real balance there and making sure, that the processes that you have in place and you said identifying the competencies, good job description, what are you actually looking for, and staying true to that and not being swayed by, well, my gut thinks this, or I really like this person, they'd be great to, hang out with, sort of thing. So I think that is a tendency we all tend to have.
Most of our mistakes have happened in that gut feel.
Yeah,
that's right.
People. How old? Okay, so you guys started the company, 5 years ago, 7 years ago?
5.5.
Yep.
Yeah. So how many years or months went by before you had a really good job description for your salespeople, or for the sales role, for the recruiting role?
I would say, we probably focused on the recruiter or guys that are recruiting our external candidates to place. We probably had that, more focus on that. I would say some of our other ancillary roles in the organization, not so much, because I think we recognize we got to get that right. So we did focus on that. We have pretty solid descriptions and what's required, but I think what we thought we needed initially has changed. And so we got to continually to tweak that to make sure we're getting the right.
Update it.
Yep. Tim and I are a little more seasoned in the business world, so we probably had a little more straight. You take a new, a first-time startup, and like you said, I'm sure you experience it all the time, especially in the little bit smaller organizations as you work with them where they don't have any of that structure or that process. So, Tim asked a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
They end up hiring friends, relatives. Oh, I know a guy that was in my fraternity. It's going to be my attorney. Whether that guy knows anything about employment law or not, you guys have seen it, right?
No, of course, we would never hire any family, as we're looking here with some of the people that are in the studio with us. But they're competent people, okay? That's right.
What is that?
What is that about? How you work with a lot of different companies. So obviously, as Tim indicated, in the early days, we probably maybe leaned almost too heavily on our core values, that people met our values and didn't balance that as well with competency all the time. We've gotten, I think, a lot better at that. But on that, obviously those core values matter. I'm confident that everybody in our organization could tell you our core values: honor to God in everything we do, you bring value and respect back to the trades, and measure our success by the number of people we positively impact. And then so that mission statement and those values in the companies that you kind of work with, or in just your feel on it, I mean, how important is having those values and that mission as part of that, process of finding the right people?
It's extremely valuable. A players are not attracted to mediocre organizations. Well, I'm sure you guys experienced this before. I always kind of use the experience of I get a sales guy that comes, knocks on my door, and he's got like the 2-day, the shadow. He's wearing a tie, but the top button isn't buttoned, and the tie is a little disheveled, and he's got a jacket that's maybe got some. Well, like immediately, your brain. This is human nature. It goes back to millions of years of the human. Immediately, in the first 20 seconds, your brain is sizing up that individual. Can I trust this individual or not? And then the same thing happens. This is not a marketing. We're not talking about marketing your company and vision statement and all that. But this is the exact same thing with vision, that people will look at organizations, all those organizations that are out there, who's got a compelling vision, who's got compelling values, who lives out their values. That's why you see a lot of these organizations on their website. They may give to a half a dozen different organizations, and they front center, are giving back to the community. The two things: one, people that are looking for new opportunities, they want to go work for an organization that's meaningful, that connects with their motivation. And that's the vision, having a crystallized vision, speaking. I mean, if you read any of the business books, they'll say, gosh, the CEO has got to have a clear, crystal clear vision of what that company is and the why. Go back to the Simon Sinek and start with why. And then, of course, the values. Do they align with who I am? A players are not attracted to companies that do not have good, clear vision, good, clear leadership, good, clear values, and know how to live those values out. And I'm going to say, if you don't have a good, solid hiring process, if it's not a good experience, like meeting the disheveled sales guy at the front door, you're the best candidates. Thanks, but no thanks. Skillwork. I've got an afternoon interview. That's what happens. We're not talking about marketing. We're talking about having an organization that where you live out that vision, live out those values, and then it gets communicated, and people see it. People, they smell right through that. People that companies that try to market this and try to market, they think they're fooling nobody. They're fooling nobody. It's very important to have the vision and the values and have it clearly communicated.
Thank you for that, Tom. I think it's right. And we recognize that. I think Brett and I's experience prior to starting this company, having been in a variety of different settings, we saw the mantras, the values written on the walls, the all hands meetings, and it's all just empty if people don't follow through on it. So that's a great point.
I know we were talking about some books, but Conscious Business by Fred Kaufman, put this book in the notes. This is a fantastic read.
But what is that Conscious Business you mentioned? Is that talking about more of your culture and living up to that? What's the focus of that?
Yes, exactly. It's thought, how do you create an environment where it's not just about metrics and performance, but how do you create an environment where you take a B player and that B player becomes an A player? How do you take an environment where people they intuit, it doesn't become a job anymore. It becomes part of their vocation, that the organization actually serves the employees that then carry out the vision and the values of the business. Who wants to go work for a dying organization? Nobody. Who wants to go work for a growing organization? Everybody. I call it magic in the margin, right? You can you can get on any airline and just see the way the pilot and the stewards interact with you. And you're like, wow, this is this is a whole different level than what I'm used to. You can walk into any restaurant, you can walk into any hospital, you can walk into any educational institution. Well, gosh, that stuff doesn't happen magically, but that's people at the top, the senior leaders that know how to build that. So when you build an organization that's like that, not only do you become a magnet for top talent, you become a magnet for clients, prospects. That's the beauty of it. That's how this whole thing compounds and grows.
Is the skilled labor shortage hurting your company's bottom line? Skillwork is the premier staffing agency focusing exclusively on skilled labor. Our team of highly skilled workers augments your existing teams for elevated impact and decreased downtime. Partnering with hundreds of facilities in more than 30 states, we deploy our traveling industrial technicians to work for you on a contract basis. Our philosophy is simple: to honor God in all we do, bring respect back to the skilled trades, and positively impact those around us. For more information on how Skillwork can deliver the top labor talent you need, visit skillwork.com or call us at 402-447-7058. Call us today to see how Skillwork can work for you.
And I know this podcast, we're talking about attracting talent, and there's tools and tips and processes, and you talked about as a whole new generation and different ways and techniques. But at the end of the day, it's not a place people want to work at, and they truly enjoy it.
And sometimes, like you said, you work hard to get the right people on the bus. You work hard to get the people on the seats, and sometimes you got to open the door and let them off the bus. So, it kind of goes full circle. But you got to create that. You want them to stay on the bus and want to be there. The worst thing is they stay on the bus and they don't really want to be there.
Yeah.
Well, they call that quiet quitting.
Something like that.
Yeah.
What do you think on the, obviously there's a ton of pre-employment assessments and testing and this and that, and we talked a little minute ago, kind of your feeling or your gut feel. So what do you think is when you're working with this and working with all these companies, is there value in the assessments? And then at the end of the day, obviously as leaders, we do need to have a little bit of a gut feel as well, but not 100% gut, maybe not 100% data driven. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Pre-employment surveys, absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the thing with employees that you're hiring. There are two things. One, there are hardcore personality characteristic traits, which, by the way, it's cross-generational. So it doesn't matter if you're a baby boomer or a Gen Z or a millennial. Hardcore personality characteristic traits. Are you an introvert? Or are you an extrovert? Are you an analytical decision maker, or are you a field decision maker? Do you have high conformance and follow the rules, or do you have low conformance and create your own rules? Those are hardcore personality characteristic traits that are cross-generational. Doesn't matter what generation, doesn't matter how old, doesn't matter what country. So let's say you're looking for a salesperson for your organization. Well, you want to use a personality profile that will tell you this individual has the hardcore personality characteristic traits that can relate to people, extroverted, can think quick on their feet, have lower analytical skills, have drive. They can stay in charge of a verbal transaction. They have lower conformance. They don't take no for an answer. They figure out a way beyond the gatekeeper to get it. They can deal with rejection. So one side of the coin is having a personality profile. Well, first off, you have to know what the hardcore personality characteristic traits you're looking for in the job that you're trying to fill, and then utilizing a tool. There's many out there that will survey. Oh, Tom's an introvert. Well, probably not going to make a great sales guy. Or Tom's highly analytical, probably not going to make a good cold caller. Knowing what you're looking for, and then having a survey to test, to basically find out, what individual the candidates are that you're testing. Now, the other side of the coin is the culture survey. So now we get into work preferences. And every organization has a culture, correct? The culture is either venturesome or they're very prudent. Venturesome, they make decisions on the fly. Prudent, well, we think we can make decisions very slow and we think everything out. A culture could be a win-win culture versus a win-lose. So theory X versus theory Y. Win-win, we care about our employees. They come to work. They put their first foot forward. Theory X culture, all employees, we've got they're gonna figure out some way to work 6 hours and get paid for 8 hours. So we've got to get metrics on them. We've got to manage them. And is the culture collaborative or is it more individualistic? And so all these organizations, every organization has a culture. And so on the backside or the other side of the coin is having a good survey. First off, knowing your culture. And then secondly, having a good survey that tests the culture. And this is where the work preferences come in. So look at this right here, guys. I come to the office. Why? Because that's what I've done my whole life. I'm not interested in working remote. When I'm at home, I'm not interested in flipping up a laptop and having a home office and all that. That's my work preference. But there's, I want to be in a venturesome organization. I want to be in an organization that makes decisions quickly. But every candidate that you're looking at will have certain work preferences, and you want to find candidates that match the culture that is in your organization. And what research shows is that when you survey the culture side, that, if they're off on, a couple of these axes, then the probability of them staying very long is very low. It's a fish out of water. They don't like. So it's personality profile on one side and then culture survey on the other side. And even if you just do that, you're going to increase your hit rate and retention rate on your candidates.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom, of those two things. What I didn't hear, it's probably an assumption, but used to be the driver was, do you have the requisite skill and experience to do that job, and not really caring about the other stuff. But we found, because of our company, we say we have an augmented workforce. We will augment your staffing. We augment your workforce. And a lot of that is, do they have the skills? But what we find more frequently when we have somebody that doesn't work out at one of our client locations, it's very seldom the skills. It's almost always a personality clash. They don't fit in with our culture.
Right.
They're not a team player. Yeah. It's so kind of the skills and experience is pretty easy, but we focus a lot. We meaning businesses in general.
Yeah. And this is what we've learned over the last 20 years. We used to interview on ability, skills, and knowledge, right? That was it. But thank God we've gotten a lot smarter.
Yeah, for sure. I talked about this contingent workforce. We like to say augment. We're going to augment your workforce. Our business, what we do, we're a staffing company. The vertical we're in is mostly manufacturing, industrial. And oftentimes what we're trying to do is help companies solve their problem because they can't execute what they need to do because of a lack of a talent. So, this is a trend that we're seeing some in our space, manufacturing primarily. This is new, because they're used to staffing companies that just basically just throw them, 1,000 candidates and maybe one of them will work and they'll hire those. So we're more, there are employees, they'll go to your location, they'll augment your team for as long as you need them. Are you seeing this trend in other verticals? And what are your thoughts on that augmented workforce approach?
I went to a business conference. It was not HR related. It was staffing related. One of the keynote speakers said that if you look at over the last 2,000 years, actually it wasn't until like the 1200s that we started having trades as far as like jobs and things like that. The shoe man, the guy that makes shoes, the guy that fixes horses, the iron worker, all that stuff. Prior, people just lived on farms and you just had that stuff. But it wasn't until 12th century where cities and jobs and started to get crafts started to get developed. But I went to this talk and the keynote speaker said this whole idea, this was the Industrial Revolution, obviously, this whole idea where dad goes to work for 40 hours a week, works at this location, comes home, they have the weekend, on and on and on. That whole 40-hour a week, 2 weeks of vacation, all that stuff, that is just a blip. When you take the history of the way that humans have worked, the concept of work, just a blip on the radar screen, and it's not going to last long. His message is how we've been working since the Industrial Revolution, the 50s, 60s, 70s, it's not going to last long. People are going to go back to a concept of work that we have, that we're more used to, frankly, in the history of humanity, 1,000 years to 800 years. And so what that means is that and I know you guys have experienced this as well. The kids that are coming out of college, they don't want one job. They want 3 jobs. They want 3 part-time jobs. And then they want to do something else on the side. The younger generations are driving a change in that the way that work is performed. And the baby boomers and the Gen X, Gen Zs and all that, they kind of like it. And so they're jumping on board with it. So the whole staff, you've got to. This is not do we or don't we. This is, you've got a product, you got a manufacturing company, a product to get out. You've got to figure out how to augment your workforce. You've got to figure out like how to attract part-time type workers to work, these different shifts or different lines or in a manufacturing setting. And then the other thing, which, obviously manufacturing, that's one thing, but there's a lot of jobs where offshoring, even my little company, we've got, 3 people working for us out of the Philippines. And so it's like looking now, like globally, how can I acquire talent to do the things that I need to do in my organization? If you're thinking that you're going to like traditionally build a workforce and keep it, good luck. You're swimming upstream and that stream is flowing against you really hard.
Those are great insights. And we talk about that. And it really is it's an education. And your team, Brett leads primarily our sales team. And a big part of what you're doing is educating folks on that.
You're right, Tom. Since the Industrial Revolution, we talk about it all the time. We were just at a trade show out in Philadelphia, and it's a big education process because a lot of these, what we deal with a lot is the maintenance managers and the plant managers trying to find, the skilled trade talent. And they really want the 50s, 60s to come back. They think that the talent is going to show up at their door. And the reality is, so it becomes this education and this idea of starting to think differently about how they're going to solve this talent issue. And the reality is you're going to have to bring the talent in, whether, like I said, whether in some doesn't work in our situation for putting people in manufacturing plants to offshore.
You just have to, this is ABCs of labor economics, right? The labor force is going to sell their labor to the buyer, and supply and demand, wage inflation. How do you attract labor to sell their time to you to get stuff done? This is classic labor economics.
It really is a supply. It's a supply chain issue we're talking about in its core. The suppliers of labor are individuals now. They are freelance agents more and more so. And
Brad Cast did a study on the demographics. I don't know if you guys got that or not, but in fact, anybody listening to this should read that, because they talk about the demographics on the labor force. The bottom line is that we're not graduating enough kids from school. We're not having enough babies, and we're not immigrating enough people. And so your clients think they have it tough now. Holy cow. The message you need to be talking to your folks is that, guys, like, it's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time.
So you better start.
The studies, as you say, you're talking about the broader, labor force and probably, but just in our kind of world in the skilled trade space, it's bad now. It's 2 million short. They say by 2030 we'll be at 3 million because you got 5 leaving the workforce for 2 that are coming behind it. So the math isn't that hard to figure out. You're going to have to figure out how to get your piece of the pie, you're going to have to figure out a different way to get it to you. So
you got it right. You got to get creative.
You got to attract it.
You got to get creative. Right?
I think, Tom, been a wealth of knowledge here, and a lot of good things for us to take away, and hopefully people listening here as well. I want to give you the floor. If you had something important we haven't hit on, we haven't touched on, that employer out there, maybe they're looking at using some staffing support or augmented workforce or just solving their own problem. What do you think they could do? What would be a takeaway to try to solve this problem that we haven't addressed?
Yeah. Okay. So we're just talking about the supply side being so limited, attracting employees. But my gosh, number one, like, get a hiring process in place within the organization. And a hiring process, job profile, know what you're looking for, use some of the tools, and then crafting interview questions that ask about the competencies, specifically ask about the values of the organization. I think you started the podcast by saying that 70-something% of these businesses don't have nothing in place. That's like foundational, huge. And then a couple of resources, top grading is more for senior level people, but a lot of great tips and top grading in terms of, how to interview. And then the other one, I've got many enterprise sized clients that have grown from a few million, to, well north of 100 million in revenue. They talk about the WHO book from Randy Street and Jeff Smart in terms of being like critical in them being able to go from this phase to this phase to that phase. But just, you got to get some science around hiring people. And, frankly, you guys are a staffing company. That's your core competency, finding people. Oh, and by the way, if you want to go with the cheapest guys on the block, you pay what you get for. But, find a couple staffing partners that do what you guys do and partner with them to help with the flow of candidates. It should be all part of the human capital acquisition strategy within any of your clients.
We certainly appreciate your time here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
And I can't endorse Tom and his group more. They really care. They're knowledgeable, they're approachable, and like I said, their company deals with small all the way up to enterprise size, and he treats everybody with the same sort of respect that he demonstrated here. So we appreciate you being on board, Tom. And for those out there watching, thank you for joining us on the Skillwork Forum today. I hope this discussion had a positive impact on you, added some value to your organization. Remember, we exist really to connect what we think are world-class skilled craftsmen to companies that need them. So if you find yourself in need of folks like this can help you advance your company, reach out to us. We'd love to help you. If we can't help you, we'll be honest with you and point you in a direction you can. So until next time, thank you again for joining us at the Skillwork Forum, and thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Well,
thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Brad.